Dan, welcome to the show. How can I help you today?
Yeah, I'm just calling in because I have this awful situation with someone I worked with, and it really just ruined everything moving forward. There was just a toxic work environment, and I'm not really sure how to handle it.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about what's going on.
So, what I did with this guy was essentially I was like a human marketing aspect. I would go to these different Fortune 500 companies and, talk on his behalf and help make sure events went smoothly. The issue is whenever he did things, with deals and the management over there that I was unaware of that made everything difficult. And a lot of them never even met him, so they assumed I was the owner and were throwing all their complaints at me, and I had to try to properly divert it. But at the same point, every time I would bring it up with him, he would, just kind of brush it off and, just ultimately tack on more issues that weren't my responsibility.
Okay, so let me just understand the structure here. So, do you still work for him or no?
No, I chose not to continue.
Okay, and so you're just kind of wondering what you could have done or what you could do in the future if you have a similar situation?
Yeah, and then also, how do I properly go about, maybe doing some legal jurisdiction on him? Just because, there was workplace harassment in a sense because of this. I would have grown adults yell at me just because they thought I was the one that curated a whole event, to go down the gutter, and they're assuming I'm the one that cost them money.
Oh, okay. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a psychologist, so I can't really speak too much on the legality side. In terms of maybe preventing that from happening again or finding yourself in a similar situation, we could probably talk about that if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Okay. Just so I understand, were you working for a company or for one individual he hired you?
So it was one individual who hired me to speak on behalf of his company.
Okay, so he has a company.
Correct.
And were you considered a business development representative or a sales rep or something?
Yeah, basically I was considered like a lead manager, he would say, for all these on-site events.
For on-site events. Okay, and so you would go there and speak on his behalf to get the event set up or to sell the event?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And so then he would come and he would do the event, and if they weren't happy, they would come back to you?
He would never physically be in the event. He would stay out of state, and I would be the one that's always there in person, managing every other person that he's hired that's, below me. Even if I've never met them before, he would just say, "Here,
Oh.
go ahead. I think they're good enough." Even though some of them, there was issues on-site events with them doing drugs, and I tried to inform him, and then when there was a big fiasco with that, again, the company thinks I'm in charge, but I'm like, no, I assure you, I've brought up these complaints before to the actual owner. But
Okay, and so what company would complain? Was like the company that was putting on the event?
yes, it would be the company that usually hired him for his services for the event.
Okay. What kind of services were they? Just like event services?
Yeah, event services, usually health oriented. So he would, bring in different massage therapists, healthy food, smoothies. He kind of was
Understood.
a third party to bring like different holistic values to corporations.
Okay, I understand. So just to recap, so companies or corporations would hire your company essentially as an event services company to bring in different types of services. This gentleman you worked for owned the company. You were the manager on site for the events, and you wouldn't have a say in who was hired. They would just send the folks for you to manage on site at the events.
Correct. Yep. Perfect.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. That's one kind of major issue. I mean, listen, I think this happens a lot where an on-site manager at events doesn't have a lot of say in the hiring of the people they're managing. So that could create some problems for sure. I would just say in general, it's always a good practice for a manager who's going to be managing people to have some say in who they manage and hiring people they manage. Now, for something like this, because probably I'm assuming that the people that were being hired and you were managing were independent contractors. They were working on particular projects or events as like one-offs sometimes, or a couple of them, right?
Yep. Correct.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a little bit more difficult. But the only thing I mean, because you're not working there anymore, there's no feedback that you can give. But I mean, in the future, what I might recommend is if you find yourself in a similar situation where you are asked to manage a project with certain people under you, if you could request or demand that you have some say in the hiring process or some say in who you're managing, that would be pretty important, because that can help ward off some of these issues. In the case that you don't, and you have some folks under you that are not performing well, or that they're doing drugs or something, and they're just, what authority do you have in that situation? Can you fire people on the spot, or what were you able to do?
So the only thing I was able to do in that situation was just, I would have to call him between every incident and be like, how do you, I never had the full say in it. I just had to make sure it went as smooth as possible and just tell him when something, popped up.
Okay. Gotcha. So the best thing you can do is document and then report back to the company, is what you're saying.
Yeah. It's just, even though obviously I had to do that, but it just is a hassle because, in the moment, you still have people arguing at you like, why am I hiring your company? And I'm there in a sense. It's like, I agree with them, but at the same point, I still need to calm them down. So it's like between stuck in a hard place and a rock.
Yeah, that's a tough position, man. It's a tough position. So I think the only things I can offer at the moment are, number one, if you find yourself in another position like that, another role like that, can you have some say in who's working for you, number one? Can you have some say in creating consequences for people that are underperforming? Number two, are those two things possible? And number three, can you get some training in de-escalation? So de-escalating customers when things are not going right and they're starting to get upset. How do you have more effective interactions and customer service in those instances? I'm sure it's very difficult to talk to a customer who's irate. Some training around that might be important. And then also, what is the protocol? Is it just I have to call back to headquarters and let this person yell at me? Or is there someone that can come and support you? Do you have a support system there on site? So some of these, there's a lot of good learning lessons in this. And the question is it possible in your next role or your next gig to fix some of that stuff and to make some requests that could kind of head off some of these potential issues?
Well, that's the main reason why I left in the end, is because I would try to implement all those, use my voice. And because of his lack of effort is when I realized that, this was useless, because, I would figure out the answers, how to fix every dilemma, but he just put in zero effort on his part. So that's why it's one of those negative lose-lose situations, where it ultimately wasn't worth the money, which he somehow even had excuses paying on time. So I just knew that everything was a red flag.
Yeah. Sounds like you made the right decision. If the costs of you staying there outweigh the benefits, you gotta take off for sure. I'm glad that you made a good decision for yourself, and you are now in hopefully a new role, or you've moved on from that role that didn't work for you. I hope that, in the future you'll have a little bit more control and they actually do listen to your feedback more and can make some changes based on what you on the ground are telling them from what you're seeing.
Yeah, that would be great. But sadly, I've noticed in this type of field, an independent contractor that then has to manage other people, for the most part, a lot of these companies really don't care at the end of it. They just want to make sure they have pictures, that the event looks good, and that they're getting paid. They don't really care about any of the headaches, which is really, silly in a sense, just because, I feel like that's how you get retention for future events. But I guess they just care more about the volume than they do about actual retention. Yeah,
that's sad to hear. I'll put it out there. I'll hope that you find a company that really does care and really does listen to its employees and independent contractors and makes changes based on those. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, Dan. Hey, thanks for tuning into the Peacebuilding with Dr. Pollack show. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more workplace conflict advice. Share on social media if you think your friends and colleagues would benefit from this episode. And if you have a workplace conflict and want to be a caller on our show for free coaching and advice, please email podcast@pollackpeacebuilding.com. Thanks.